Jack Harlow. For years, his name stood as proof that talent, persistence, and timing could turn a dreamer from Louisville into a household figure. His songs climbed the charts, his charisma carried him across stages, and his reputation placed him at the center of conversations in music, culture, and beyond. He wasn't just an artist, he was a symbol of possibility, a young man who seemed unstoppable. But recently, something changed. The applause grew quieter, the headlines took a sharp turn, and the story of Jack Harlow became far more complicated than fans ever imagined. What happened was sudden. It was jarring, and it was enough to make supporters question whether the artist they thought they knew was facing a challenge no chart position could fix. One moment, Jack was being celebrated as the next great star of his era. The next, his name was caught in stories that carried more weight than music videos or award nominations. Social media lit up with speculation. News outlets scrambled for details. And behind the curtain of fame, a new chapter was unfolding, one that nobody could have predicted, but everyone wanted to understand. Was it a personal struggle concealed beneath the glamour of success? Was it a career misstep that echoed louder than his biggest hit? Or was it something even more complex, the kind of moment that forces us to look at how fragile the rise to stardom really is? This is not just the story of a musician at the height of his fame. It's the story of what happens when success collides with pressure, when image collides with reality, and when an artist's future is no longer defined by the songs they release, but by the headlines that follow them. Tonight, we uncover what really happened to Jack Harlow and why the world may never see him in the same light again. To understand what has unfolded around Jack Harlow lately, we first need to look at the story that built him into the figure everyone thought they knew. Born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, Jack began as just another teenager with a notebook, recording verses in his bedroom, hoping someone would listen. What set him apart was not just talent, but persistence. Mixtape after mixtape, self-released tracks, and hours spent sharpening his craft eventually placed him on the radar of an industry constantly searching for the next breakthrough. That breakthrough came with a single that seemed to erupt overnight. What's Poppin' wasn't just a song, it was a moment. Suddenly, Jack Harlow was no longer just a local name. He was a national conversation, propelled into the spotlight faster than anyone, including Jack himself, could have prepared for. The fame was intoxicating, the opportunities endless, and the public eager to embrace him as a new voice in hip-hop. But fame is rarely simple. The higher the platform, the sharper the scrutiny. As Jack's career skyrocketed, so did the expectations and the whispers. Some questioned whether he belonged at the top. Others wondered if his image was carefully constructed, a product of the industry rather than the streets. And while Jack smiled through the pressure, the reality behind the headlines was becoming harder to hide. Then came the moment that changed everything. The headlines shifted from chart positions to controversy, from music reviews to shocking reports that left fans stunned. Suddenly, the question wasn't just about Jack Harlow's music. It was about Jack Harlow himself. What had really happened? And why was the world only hearing about it now? Before the world knew his name, Jack Harlow was just another kid walking the halls of high school in Louisville, Kentucky. He was quiet, observant, but always restless, constantly writing, constantly recording, constantly searching for a way to turn his thoughts into music. Teachers and classmates recall a boy who wasn't interested in fitting in, but in standing out. Even then, there was a sense that he was preparing for something larger, something he couldn't yet explain. Jack's earliest mixtapes were passed around in small circles, burned onto CDs, uploaded to online forums. The kind of music meant more for the people who believed in him than for the masses. But slowly, track by track, the sound sharpened. The rhymes grew tighter, the voice more confident, and his ambition impossible to ignore. He wasn't chasing trends. He was carving out his own lane. By the time What's Poppin' hit the airwaves, Jack had already built years of groundwork. The sudden success may have seemed overnight to the world, but for him, it was the result of long nights in makeshift studios, the sacrifices of youth spent chasing a dream, and the unshakable belief that one day he'd break through. And break through he did. The track spread like wildfire, pushing him onto national radio, then television, then the biggest stages in music. Collaborations with some of the most influential names in hip-hop followed. Jack Harlow was no longer the boy from Louisville. He was the face of a new wave, a star whose story had just begun. But even as the applause thundered louder, there were cracks forming in the background, whispers that he didn't belong, accusations that he was being pushed too quickly by the industry, questions about whether his fame he earned was built to last, or if it was just a matter of time before something or someone would test him. And when that test came, it wouldn't be through music charts or award shows. It would come in the form of an event so unexpected, so shocking, that it would change the way the world looked at Jack Harlow forever. At the height of Jack Harlow's rise, when the world seemed to celebrate his every move, the first signs of trouble emerged. Fame, after all, is rarely without cost. As Jack stepped deeper into the spotlight, the very attention that fueled his success began to turn against him. Critics questioned his authenticity. Was Jack truly the voice of a generation, or was he a carefully crafted image designed to sell records? Conversations about culture and ownership of sound followed him everywhere. To some, he was a breath of fresh air. To others, a figure who represented everything wrong with the music industry. No longer was Jack judged only by the songs he made, but by what people believed he represented. Then came the moment that shook his hometown and cast a shadow over his career. At the 2022 Kentucky Derby, Jack arrived as a star, walking with the confidence of someone who had finally made it. But the celebration turned into tragedy when members of his security team became involved in a deadly altercation. A man lost his life, and though Jack himself was not accused of wrongdoing, his name was splashed across headlines in connection to the violence. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about music at all. It was about accountability, responsibility, and the weight of being a public figure at the center of chaos. Social media lit up with divided opinions. Some defended him, insisting he had no control over what happened. Others claimed the incident was proof that Jack's world was not as clean as it appeared. And while the truth of that day remains debated, one thing became undeniable. Jack Harlow's image was no longer untouchable. From that point on, every step he took was followed more closely, every lyric was dissected, every public appearance questioned. He was no longer simply the rising star with a hit single, he was a man whose name carried controversy. And for Jack Harlow, this was only the beginning. Narrator: Career highs versus personal lows. 20 to 30 minutes. In the years that followed, Jack Harlow's career only grew louder. He went from promising newcomer to Grammy-nominated artist. His collaborations stretched across the industry, performing alongside Lil Nas X, sharing studio time with icons like Drake, and securing endorsements that placed his face on billboards across the country. The boy from Louisville had transformed into a global figure, standing in the same rooms as the artists he once idolized. To the outside world, it looked like Jack had achieved everything he had ever wanted. But behind the glow of the spotlight, a different story was taking shape. With every success came sharper criticism. The larger his platform became, the more voices rose to question his place in hip-hop culture. Was he truly pushing boundaries, or simply benefiting from a system that often rewards appearance over authenticity? Fans debated, critics dissected, and Jack found himself caught between the praise of millions and the skepticism of an industry that rarely forgives missteps. The pressure was unrelenting. Sold-out tours came with grueling schedules. Constant interviews meant he could never escape the same questions about identity, authenticity, and belonging. And with each new achievement, the expectations only grew heavier. Jack was no longer being measured against his past. He was being measured against the legends of an entire genre. For an artist still finding his voice, the weight of that comparison was crushing. Then came the backlash online. Clips of awkward moments, questionable lyrics, and half-heard comments spread across social media at lightning speed. What might have been harmless for another artist became ammunition against Jack. His every move was magnified, his every word judged as if the world was waiting for him to slip. And slowly, the shine of his success began to clash with the shadows of doubt closing in around him. It was a paradox. On paper, Jack Harlow was living his dream, but in reality, the higher he climbed, the more fragile the ground beneath him became. And soon, one event would push this fragile balance to its breaking point, an event that left fans asking a question no one expected. What really happened to Jack Harlow lately? And then it happened, the moment that would change the way the world looked at Jack Harlow forever. For months, the headlines were filled with praise, chart-topping singles, high-profile performances, interviews where he was presented as hip-hop's newest star. But almost overnight, those headlines shifted. They were no longer celebrating success. They were asking questions, harsh ones, questions Jack couldn't escape. Reports surfaced that Jack was under pressure like never before. Tensions on tours spilled into the public eye. Stories of exhaustion, canceled appearances, and visible frustration began to spread. And then came the incident that forced the world to take notice. A single event, caught on camera, replayed endlessly across social media, that painted Jack not as the untouchable star, but as a man facing the collapse of everything he had built. The footage was everywhere, fans speculating, critics dissecting, and the industry asking the same chilling question: was this the beginning of the end for Jack Harlow? For those who had watched his rise, the shock was almost too much to process. Just months earlier, Jack seemed to embody everything the industry wanted. Now he was at the center of speculation. Was it personal turmoil breaking through the surface? Was it reckless decisions made under the weight of fame? Or was Jack Harlow simply another artist crushed by the machine that had lifted him up so high so quickly? The fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with commentary. Fans divided into two camps: those who defended him, insisting this was just a misstep, and those who claimed the real Jack Harlow had finally been exposed. News outlets scrambled for answers, digging deeper into his past, searching for clues in his lyrics, and speculating on the motives behind his behavior. The man who once represented hope, fun, and promise had become a case study in how quickly everything can change. And for Jack himself, the silence spoke louder than any song. Days passed without a response, weeks without clarity, and in that silence, theories grew louder, each more dramatic than the last. Some said he was battling pressures nobody could understand. Others claimed the industry had turned its back on him. But one thing was certain: the Jack Harlow the world thought it knew was gone, and in his place stood a figure surrounded by uncertainty. The breaking point had been reached, and from here, nothing would ever be the same. In the aftermath of the breaking point, the world turned into investigators. Every headline, every social media post, every video clip of Jack Harlow was dissected, studied, and questioned. It was no longer just a story about an artist. It had become a public inquest where millions of strangers pieced together their own version of what happened. The media moved quickly. Tabloids splashed dramatic images across their covers. News outlets ran segments where experts weighed in on the psychology of fame and whether Jack's actions were warning signs of something far deeper. Old interviews were pulled from the archives, with every word reinterpreted as if it held hidden meaning. What once felt like harmless jokes, casual remarks, or offhand moments were now used as evidence in the court of public opinion. Social media amplified the noise. Hashtags with Jack's name trended worldwide, sometimes in support, other times in condemnation. Fan pages transformed into debate forums with endless threads asking, was Jack Harlow a victim of his own choices, or a casualty of an industry that had pushed him too far, too fast? Each comment, each theory only fueled the fire. Inside the music world, the scrutiny was even sharper. Some insiders questioned whether Jack was ready for the spotlight at all.
Others suggested he was under too much pressure from executives demanding hit after hit. The unspoken question lingered. Was Jack in control of his career, or had the industry built him up only to tear him down once he showed weakness?
And through all of this, Jack remained silent. That silence left a void, and the void was quickly filled with speculation. Was he working through personal struggles behind closed doors? Was his team deliberately keeping him away from the spotlight? Or was there something else, something darker, something bigger that the world wasn't being told? The investigation wasn't just about what happened in that single shocking moment. It became about Jack Harlow's entire story. Every triumph, every controversy, every rumor was suddenly re-examined under microscope. And as the scrutiny grew harsher, the line between fact and speculation blurred beyond recognition. What remained was a question that no headline could answer. Was Jack Harlow the architect of his own downfall? Or was he the latest example of how fame can consume even the brightest stars? When the dust began to settle, what remained was not clarity, but confusion. Jack Harlow, once celebrated as hip-hop's golden newcomer, now found himself at a crossroads. His image had been altered, his reputation shaken, and his silence only deepened the uncertainty. The world was no longer waiting for his next hit single. It was waiting for answers. Professionally, the consequences were undeniable. Some endorsements grew quieter. Promoters and brands, once eager to attach their names to Jack, began to tread carefully. The spotlight that had once felt warm now felt harsh, unforgiving, and unrelenting. Every public appearance carried the weight of scrutiny. Every performance measured against the question, was he still the artist the world had believed in? For his fans, the divide grew wider. A loyal base continued to defend him, reminding others of his humanity, insisting that mistakes, or even moments of collapse, should not define an entire career. But others felt betrayed, convinced that the person they had admired was no longer the same. The Jack Harlow they thought they knew had been replaced by uncertainty. And yet, there was resilience. Even through the criticism, Jack's music remained in circulation. His voice still filled arenas. His story had not ended, but it had changed. The carefree narrative of the boy who rose from Louisville to global fame had been replaced with something far more complicated. A story of survival, of reinvention, and of an artist now defined not just by success, but by how he faced failure. Today, Jack Harlow stands at a fragile point in his career. The question is no longer whether he can make a hit record. It is whether he can rebuild trust, reshape his image, and overcome the weight of a moment that nearly ended everything. And for his fans, critics, and the industry alike, one question continues to echo. Where does Jack Harlow go from here?
The story of Jack Harlow is no longer just about music. It is about the rise of a young artist who captured the world's attention, the controversies that tested his image, and the breaking point that forced everyone to question what they thought they knew. Fame gave him the world, but it also exposed him to pressures few can endure. Success brought applause, but it also carried shadows that fame alone could not erase. What happened to Jack Harlow lately is more than a headline. It is a reminder that the journey from small-town dreamer to global icon is rarely as perfect as it seems. Behind the awards, the tours, and the hit singles is a story of resilience, of mistakes, and of a man still searching for his place in an industry that can both build and break its stars overnight. The truth is, Jack Harlow's story isn't finished. It's still unfolding, one performance, one decision, one headline at a time. The question is not just what happened to him, but what happens next. Will he rise from this moment stronger than before, or will the weight of expectation and controversy define him forever? As we close this chapter, the mystery remains unsolved. The world continues to watch, to speculate, and to wonder, who is Jack Harlow when the lights fade, when the cameras stop, and when the music is no longer enough? Thank you for watching. If you found this story as shocking and thought-provoking as we did, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to True Crime Tales for more in-depth true crime-style investigations into the lives and challenges of the world's most talked-about figures. And in our next episode, we uncover another star whose fame took a turn no one expected. Stay tuned. What do you think really happened to Jack Harlow? Was this just a stumble on the road to greater success, or the beginning of a downfall no one saw coming? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to follow this story as it continues to unfold, make sure you hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel, because the next chapter may be even more shocking than this one.